are good to go in starting our Friday morning's webinar. Good morning to all of you online. Great to have you. There are still colleagues and people joining, but we would like to stick to the starting time as much as we can, since all of you for sure have a well-filled Friday morning agenda. Allow me to introduce the topic and the agenda of today, and then soon also pass the further floor to the colleagues. This topic and the agenda of today around the, I think, very, very interesting topic of understanding and improving citizen satisfaction. We are, I think, extremely pleased that we can offer today's webinar to all of you. And by the way, this webinar is also recorded, so you can also find it later on our website, and also share it with other of your colleagues or people you think that might be interested. Second one, as you can see, 2 weeks ago, we had another webinar that was dedicated specifically to the topic of digital government in the Western Balkans. Also there, you can find the full recording with presentations, the materials, everything on Sigma's website. As said, today is the second in line, and then yet in another 2 weeks, we have the third one, the concluding one before summer, which is dealing with behavioral insights. If you haven't received or seen the agenda and haven't received the invitation, feel free to reach out to us, because the agenda and the invitation are out, and you should have, or you could have seen it passing by and also registered for it. On the topic of today, well, the topic of today has all the three topics, all the three areas, they need to be seen in Sigma's wider work and Sigma's wider mandate in the context of the principles of public administration. 6 in total, and one of them is this topic dealing with service delivery and digitalization. Behind all these principles, the principles mainly being a policy guidance, but also a whole methodological and measurement framework, there are a lot of details when it comes to indicators, when it comes to the guidance. The same in the area of service delivery and digital, that we really want to focus around this user centricity. And here we have just put in one slide, like all the principles together at 32 in total, and just would like to attract your attention to the one that is dealing with service delivery and digital, and to really summarize it into one, baseline, if you like. This is the sentence below. What we really want to do under this user-centric service design and delivery is really putting public administrations around the users. So public administration that places the users really at the center and delivers high quality and easy accessible services, both online and offline, to all people and businesses, whatever the needs are. And this is, I think, quite important also for the topic of today. This is really this user centricity. This is really trying to find out what is really driving the needs and the expectations of citizens. So when we are redesigning our services, and also the way how we deliver them, that we can take this fully into account. Therefore, how we have built our principles, and certainly the principle on service delivery, or the principles on service delivery and digital, we have taken some core and key elements into account. And it really, as said already, it really starts from the deep understanding of the user's needs and expectations. If we are not getting into really what people, citizens or businesses, what they really expect from us, it will be very difficult, if not to say impossible, to really redesign our service offer, even our policies that we're designing as public administration. So only by fully understanding or trying to understand the user's needs and expectations, we can try to improve our processes, procedures, the things that we are doing and how we are doing them. The other aspect that is really crucial in what we're doing is then also including this easy access. As already said in this baseline, what we would like to do is really deliver high quality services, really in an easy, accessible way. Easy, being it online, being it offline, easy for people with all different kind of needs and with all different kind of needs, being it because people are less mobile or people have another kind of special needs because the place where they're living, the level of education or socioeconomic background, so all the factors that might influence. Including also the aspect of digital. As you can see, we're not putting digital really first. First in the sense that, well, of course, we put a big importance to going digital, but really digital to the extent that it makes sense. And digital not as a means in itself, but really a means to a higher end, and that is the easy accessibility and also the high level of quality that we're providing. All of that translating into what we call service standards that are kind of the guarantee, the kind of commitment that we want to do, what we want to do, and how we want to do things. And that will also then be the basis for the measurement at the end of the day. In our principles, we translate all the different aspects also in different ways, in tools, in practices that are really documenting all of this. So all of this just to say that when it comes to understanding what drives satisfaction, that this is also really at the core of how we see things in Sigma in this area of service delivery. What drives satisfaction really starts from the deep understanding of the user's needs and expectations, so that along the way we can include these insights in how we do things, what we do, and then also at the end of the day that we measure this. To that extent, we are super happy that today we can offer to you this what will be a very insightful session webinar. For this, we have two speakers today. First, and really super happy to have Emily with us. Emily Balbirni, colleague from the OECD Governance Directorate. Emily is currently leading a quite big project that is funded by the European Commission, so the TSI, the Technical Support Instrument, that is really focusing on measuring citizen satisfaction. Emily will explain everything about this, but this is really like state-of-the-art work where many EU countries are involved, and that this will for sure also drive our and many countries' future work in this area. Afterwards, we have my good colleague Jose Diaz, also working in Sigma, and Jose will shed more light on the work that Sigma has been doing in the context of our measurement and the assessment in the Western Balkans in particular, where we have quite some, well, I would say very useful insights and data when it comes to the functioning of public administration and the satisfaction of citizens and businesses with what and how public administration is delivering. So also building upon Emily's talk and insights, Jose will shed further light on the state of play and actual findings in the Western Balkan economies. So we have I think a very nice agenda with also plenty of time and room for discussions, questions that can be put. So if at any stage, colleagues, you would like to raise a question, I think by now you know the drill, just raise your virtual hand and then we'll be extremely happy to pass you the floor. Also use the chat to provide comments or questions, and then we can make this as interactive as possible. So with any further ado, I will stop sharing my screen, and then I would kindly like to invite Emily to take over and to take it away. So please, Emily, the screen is all yours. We can see your presentation.
Perfect. So that's one thing done. Great. So
Mhm.
you confirm you can see it?
Yes, we can see it. Just for your info, we can also see like the two screens, also so the next slide that is upcoming. So I don't know if that's
That
on
is the
purpose.
purpose.
Um, if not, it's not an issue in itself, but if
Okay.
you rather would not like it, then
Let me then just give me 2 seconds
take your time.
because it was working perfectly
As
before.
always, in the test, it always works. Huh?
It's the classic, isn't it?
Yes.
Give me 2 seconds. What about now? It's the same.
Uh, Now it's fully perfect.
Perfect.
Fully
Great.
perfect. There you go.
Thank you,
There you go,
Nick.
Emily.
Yeah, so good morning, everybody. I'm very, very happy to be with you this morning. And thank you to Nick and Jose for the invitation in order to present a very exciting project that we have been undertaking since September 2023, part of the technical support instrument financed by the European Commission on measuring citizen satisfaction with key government services for better performance and enhanced trust. So as Nick mentioned, my name is Emily Balbirnie. I'm a policy analyst in the Governance Indicators and Performance Division at the OECD, and I'm leading the work we are currently undertaking on measuring citizen satisfaction with public services. So with regard to this project, as I mentioned, it is a project that began in September 2023 and supports 10 EU member states in delivering more user-centric administrative services. So this morning I will present the results to you, but before I do so, I think it's important to firstly highlight how this project came about and why it's important in the current context. So the OECD Trust Survey, including the latest edition in July 2024, finds that satisfaction with administrative services is a key driver of trust in the civil service and in the government. The importance of measuring citizen satisfaction has also been highlighted in the OECD recommendation on human-centered public administrative services that was adopted in September 2024. And so by further understanding and measuring the drivers of satisfaction, this can contribute to ensuring trust in the future. So the project I will present to you has developed an innovative and novel survey, which not only aims to measure the satisfaction with public services through a life event approach in the 10 countries that are covered by the project, but also aims to understand what the key drivers of satisfaction are. And so Nick mentioned in his introductory remarks elements such as easy and accessible services. And this is something that we identify as one of these key drivers of satisfaction. And so, as I mentioned, there are 10 EU member states that are participating in this project: Austria, Croatia, Estonia, Finland, Greece, Ireland, Latvia, Lithuania, Slovenia, and Spain. And this multi-country approach has really enriched the project in order for us to identify where countries are with regard to their strategies for improving human-centered services, as well as where they are with regard to the implementation of a life event approach. So with regards to the project, the first key output was to develop a measurement framework for measuring citizen satisfaction with public services. And in order to do this, we have really focused on looking at the overall performance of public services in countries and focusing on 3 stages of the user journey, looking at access, navigation, and achievement. So when we talk about access, we looked at citizens' perceptions and satisfaction with how they actually identify and access services. So how they have been, for instance, proactively informed of services they are entitled to, and the steps that they take to actually access the service. We then look at the stage navigation. So when we talk about navigation, we're really talking about all the process for actually applying for a specific service, for communicating with public service providers in countries, and also thinking about the types of channels that citizens use when they navigate services in the 10 countries we have covered. The final level is achievement. So here we are in essence looking to see whether the citizens got what they wanted from public services. And so here we look at whether the results have been achieved and whether the user is satisfied with the end results. And all of these 3 elements contribute to overall satisfaction with public services. So firstly, let me provide a brief overview of the survey. So the satisfaction survey was launched in the 10 participating countries between the 18th of October and the 27th of November 2024. And it was deployed in all national languages of the 10 countries. The survey gathered responses from 15,000 users in 10 EU member states, and they were representative of the country population for gender, age, and also for region. So I will talk you through the results of the survey, but it's important to highlight what the satisfaction survey provides. So firstly, it has provided an overall citizen satisfaction level with public services used by citizens when they are experiencing a life event. It has also enabled us to identify the key drivers of citizen satisfaction with public services, both across the 10 EU member states, but also within each EU member state covered. It has enabled us to undertake a cross-country comparison of satisfaction with life events, as well as an in-country comparison of satisfaction. And so now what I will do is I will present the results to you and highlight these elements. And you are, of course, free to ask questions at the end of the presentation. So firstly, what we have found is that citizens have accessed multiple public services associated with one or more life events over the previous 12 months. For the purposes of this survey, a user is defined as a citizen who experienced one or more of the 15 life events you see on the screen over the previous 12 months, and also who accessed public services associated with this life event. So for instance, who asked for a monetary or a non-monetary benefit, or requested, for instance, a certificate. Here you will see that the citizens are accessing multiple public services associated with the life events over the previous 12 months. And the slide shows the percentage of users that are experiencing each of the 15 life events across the 10 EU member states. So the key question is, are citizens satisfied with public services? So the satisfaction survey has found that more than 7 in 10 users on average across the EU 10 are satisfied with the public services that they used. What I'd like to highlight here, and which is relevant also for the rest of the slides, is that we asked users to rate their satisfaction level on a 1 to 5 scale. So a 1 to 2 response corresponds to dissatisfied, a 3 response corresponds to neutral, and a 4 to 5 response corresponds to satisfied. So in order to understand what is driving citizen satisfaction, we looked at all of the key aspects of the user journey. So as I mentioned previously, we looked at when users are access and navigating services, and also when they get results. And from our analysis, we have identified 9 key drivers of satisfaction that have a statistically relevant impact on overall satisfaction levels when these other drivers are present. So here we begin with the user at the center. So this is really looking at whether the service met the user's needs. We then look at proactive services, accessible services, and clear services. For measuring citizen satisfaction with life events, which are integrating public services together, we also cover the delivery of seamless services, so looking at how public services are working together in countries, as well as looking at the satisfaction level with regards to integrated services. So this is looking at, for instance, whether the user has to provide the information only once. Finally, the last key drivers relate to simple services, fast services, as well as fair services. So what I will do now is I will touch upon a few of the drivers where we see that there are different levels of satisfaction. But before I do so, I think it's interesting to present here the current level of satisfaction across the EU10 with regard to these 9 key drivers. So here you will see, and as I mentioned previously, the overall level of satisfaction in users is that more than 7 in 10 users are overall satisfied. But you do see a variation with regard to the satisfaction level depending on the drivers. And this variation can also be seen when we further develop the analysis looking at specific life events. So if we start with the user at the center, the survey has found that the countries are succeeding overall in ensuring services meet the individual needs of the users. So on average across the EU10, just over 7 in 10 users are satisfied with the degree to which the service met their needs. Here, however, you can see that there is variation across the 10 countries. Excuse me. We also wanted to look at the proactiveness of services. So countries are also providing services that are easy to find. And this is one of the ways of measuring whether services are proactive. But in addition to being able to find the service, proactive services means that users are informed of the services that they are entitled to. So I think you will all agree that when you get a text message or an email informing you prior to an application that you are entitled to a benefit, this actually increases your satisfaction with the service that you wish to receive. So throughout the survey, users were also asked whether they were informed of their duties or their obligations or benefits prior to using a specific service associated with the life event. The survey found that on average, the users are more satisfied with public services when they have been informed of the public services that they are entitled to. And we have seen a 5 percentage point increase that can be seen on average across the EU10. Here we look at accessible services, and so the survey has found that more than 6 in 10 users find it easy to access information about the public service through the channel that they wanted. So the survey has found that on average, almost half of the users, so 49% in the EU10, identified online access as their primary channel of interaction with public services. 35% identified in person as their primary channel, and 1% identified post as their primary channel. And here you will see also the breakdown with regard to accessing chat services through different channels, both in rural and urban areas. And here I would just like to also emphasize, and it's based on also what Nick was saying at the beginning with regard to going digital, that we have seen a significant variation with regard to how users are accessing services, depending on the countries that we have covered in this TSI project. So to give you an example, in Ireland, for instance, more than half of users are using digital channels to access their services. This can be compared to countries like Croatia, where even more, around 60 to 70% of users are still using physical access to services. And this is extremely interesting for us also to see the reasons why there is continuing to be this variation with regard to accessing services through different channels. So even though the satisfaction levels have been high with regard to the slides that I have presented up to now, there is room for improvement that can bring benefit in terms of satisfaction. And this can be seen particularly with regard to the clarity of services, the simplicity of services, and also the integration of services. So, as I mentioned, the delivery of clear services is considered as one of the key drivers for user satisfaction. The satisfaction survey found that on average, the share of satisfied users actually increases twofold when the user finds it clear what to do to start an application. So to give you an example here, when users indicated that it was not clear what to do to start an application or a request, the average satisfaction level of those users across the EU10 is just under 40%. However, for users who indicated that it was clear what to do to start their application or their request, the average satisfaction level actually jumps to just under 80%. The survey has also found that when users' needs are resolved with only one interaction, user satisfaction is 20 percentage points higher. So through the survey, we asked users to indicate how many times they had contacted public services in order to complete their application. Here you will see that satisfaction with public services is 20 percentage points higher for users who contacted public services 0 to 1 times, in comparison to those who contacted public services at least 5 times during their user journey. The same can be seen also with regard to the delivery of integrated services. So as I mentioned, one of the interesting aspects of looking at satisfaction through a life event lens is to see how public services and public administrations are coordinating and integrating together. We looked particularly at the application of the once and only principle in the 10 EU member states. And here, users were asked in the survey whether they had to provide the same information more than once. And here on the screen, you can see that user satisfaction is almost 30 percentage points higher when the user does not have to provide the same information more than once. So as I mentioned at the beginning, one of the other key benefits of the satisfaction survey is also to measure satisfaction with specific life events. So here you will see that though overall satisfaction with public services is high, the overall level of satisfaction varies depending on the life event. So you will see a number of the different life events that we covered through the survey on the left, as well as the differences in satisfaction level for the 10 countries. This table can actually be analysed through two angles. Firstly, within each country, so if we look at country A, for instance, the satisfaction level varies depending on the life event experienced. So for country A, the satisfaction level varies from 53% for those who lost or are looking for a job, and increases up to 81% for those who got or renewed an official ID document. We can also see that between countries, there is a variation in satisfaction level. So once again, if you look at the life event lost a loved one, you can see that there is a considerable variation with regard to the level of satisfaction, ranging from 47% satisfaction to 84% satisfaction. What's important, however, to recognize here is that life events and the complexity of the life events varies considerably. So if we consider the life event getting or renewing an official ID document, this usually is a life event that requires fewer interactions as well as less coordination across different agencies within a country. And here for that life event, you can see that there is overall across the 10 countries a high level of satisfaction with this life event. However, if we want to contrast, there are of course other life events that can be considered to be more complex and therefore require different agencies and level of governments. So here I made the example of the life event lost a loved one, as well as the life event lost and looking for a job, that can be considered to be more complex. However, you can see that even with those life events that are considered to be the most complex, you can reach a high level of satisfaction for certain countries. So this is the case, for instance, for the life event lost a loved one. So then, with regard to the life event lost a loved one, it's also interesting to compare the results across the different countries. And this data can also help us to understand where improvements can be made, as well as identify perhaps best practices within specific countries. So for the life event I lost a loved one, the application of the once only principle varies considerably across the different countries. And here we can see that there is a large variation. So if we look at country A, more than 70% provided the information only once, in comparison to country J, where more than 70% had to provide the information more than once. And this is interesting for us as we're further developing our analysis in order to be in a position to see where the differences lie with regard to the delivery of specific life events across countries. So then finally, the satisfaction survey can also enable countries to compare satisfaction across different life events in the same country. And this therefore enables countries to identify the enablers as well as the bottlenecks across specific life events. So here you will see the results for one of the participating countries for the life events having a baby, as well as the life event becoming a student. And the blue dot that you see is the satisfaction level for all users in that country. And here what you can see is that there are clear differences across the 9 key drivers of satisfaction. So for some of the drivers, such as services meeting the user's needs and providing information only once, a large difference in satisfaction can't be observed. However, for other drivers, a large difference in satisfaction can be observed. So if you look at the speed of obtaining the service, which is the second column to the right, here you can see that less than 4 in 10 users were satisfied with the speed of obtaining the service when they experienced the life event becoming a student. This can be compared to more than 70% of those users who had a baby or adopted a child who were satisfied with the speed of obtaining the service. And so by comparing the satisfaction level with across life events in one country, it can really enable the countries to identify where the good practices lie, as well as where the bottlenecks continue to exist for specific life events. And this is the work that we are currently undertaking with countries as we are now developing the analysis further for the satisfaction survey in order to go into the countries and really understand the user journey for specific life events to enable the countries to then use this data and use the sort of recent satisfaction data to understand where improvements can be made for the public service delivery in the country. And so on that, I perhaps just want to sort of summarize how these survey results will be used to improve public administrative services. So as I've mentioned, the satisfaction survey provides 4 key areas of analysis. So firstly, it enables us to identify the overall satisfaction level in countries for users of public services. It enables us to identify the key drivers of satisfaction in the countries and across the EU10. It enables us to identify the overall satisfaction level of users for each life event. And finally, it enables countries to identify the satisfaction level of users for key drivers of satisfaction for each life event. So as I've mentioned, this is data that we are currently discussing with the participating countries. And so they have been able to already identify some of the key benefits of having this satisfaction data at hand as they continue the journey through public service reforms. So one of the key aspects that countries have identified as adding value is that this data has enabled countries to complement additional qualitative data that exists in countries. So to give you an example, in Ireland, for instance, they have been focusing a lot on redesigning life events. And through this process, they have been focusing on undertaking interviews with specific users of public services. By having the satisfaction data at hand, this has really enabled them to enhance the qualitative data that they have and to really include robust data on the perceptions of citizens on the use of the public services. The data has also enabled us to start identifying good practices for the delivery of life events across countries. And this includes looking at the different user journeys that citizens have been using for accessing specific life events. So to give an example, across several of the 10 countries that we are covering in the project, we are looking at the moment at the different approaches countries have been taking with regard to the life event having a baby or adopting a child. And this has enabled us to really identify the differences with regard to the user journey and how services are delivered, and also to try and interpret how these differences can actually correspond to the different levels of satisfaction that we have seen in the satisfaction survey. Countries are also expecting to use this satisfaction data to continue the monitoring of the public service delivery within their countries, as well as to continue to identify the good practices within their countries for delivering public services. So I hope this has given you a bit of a snapshot into the project. It is definitely a project that has benefited from this multi-country approach where countries are learning from each other and are continuing to exchange with each other on the outskirts of the project. And of course, I'm available if you wish to discuss this further, or if there's an interest from you to further consider launching a satisfaction data survey within your country. So I'll now hand it back over to Nick and to any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily, for this very insightful presentation and sharing all the work with us and moreover with the participants. I'm just looking into the virtual room, if I can see any hands being put up, and I also would like to invite colleagues Jose and Louise also to check with me if I'm missing anything, so that they can also look into the chat and also into the within the attendees if there are any questions. I don't see immediately any questions, so let us then maybe start. Maybe going back to like the different drivers, as you said, Emily. I mean, you identified these key drivers in the very beginning.
Yeah.
Do you also see like a difference among, can I call it, different kind of services, that some of these drivers are more important, more influential, more defining satisfaction than for other services? If you can also highlight some insights on that.
Yeah, no problem, Nick. So indeed, with regard to the 9 key drivers that we've identified, across the EU10, so with regard to the analysis that we've done, we did identify 3 across the EU10 that had the largest, most positive influence on overall satisfaction levels. So this was services working together, services meeting people's needs, and also the speed of obtaining the service. However, we have seen differences with regard to these drivers, both across the different countries. So the drivers of satisfaction are varying across different countries. So while across the EU10, the key drivers are these seamless services, fast services, there is a considerable difference depending on the country in question. That's the first thing. And this is really enabling then the countries to use this a little bit as a compass for them in order to be able to see what exactly they need to improve on for their specific country. The other aspect that we have seen is that the drivers for the specific life events can vary considerably. So here, for instance, if I give an example, for Ireland, where we were on a country visit, we looked at 2 life events where there were different levels of satisfaction. And here we could see that there was really a different impact on satisfaction depending on the different drivers. And this has really enabled then the specific country to pinpoint, based on the life event, what they need to improve in order to increase further satisfaction. So this is something that really has enabled the countries themselves to identify and to use as a compass moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Emily, for this. Going a bit deeper, have you then also, well, depending on the life events, seen any differences there? That, for example, events that are, let's say, more technical when it comes to like passports, driving licenses. This is what I mean, more technical in terms of procedures. That there indeed this kind of seamless, even proactive, the speed, the time, that these are like crucial elements. This is what we have seen in other places. Whereas when it are life events that are like less technical but more call it personal, and when it
Yeah,
comes to um, well, losing a loved one,
of course.
or marriage, divorce, so the more in-person and personal ones, that their different drivers starts to matter. That probably time and
And
smooth
contact.
procedures. Yeah, and that indeed that time might not be like the most critical one, but
Yeah,
it's indeed rather like indeed in-person contact.
yeah.
Or the well, motivation of some decisions taken or not taken. So this kind of well, different drivers when it
Yeah.
comes to different kind, nature of services, even life events more broadly.
So yes, we have seen the difference. And what I think has been interesting with the project is the fact that for each of the countries that is participating, they have to select now out of the 15 life events, two that they wish to focus on. And so countries have tended to select in a way life events that have different levels of complexity, and also I would say, Nick, based on your comparisons, different levels of emotional complexity based on the life events. And so yes, we haven't fully pushed the regression analysis for the drivers on that aspect, something that we hopefully will do. But what we have seen though is that those life events that are less complex tend to have higher levels of satisfaction. However, one of the elements that we have seen, because since countries are in a way selecting life events, that enables us to compare the results across the different countries. So to give you an example, there are a few countries that have selected the life event, getting an ID document or renewing a passport. Even though the level of satisfaction is high overall for those countries, and I've showed that in the table that I presented, um, with the 9 key drivers, there are variations across the countries. So that's something that we're continuing to look at, particularly also to look at with regards to how the countries are accessing the services. With regard to the life events that are considered more complex, but also indeed life events that could have more of a negative connotation, because this is something that we really try to consider, and to consider the bias also associated with that when we developed the survey, because of course when it comes to having a baby, that tends to be quite a joyous occasion in someone's life. So even if there has been complexity associated with it, your overall satisfaction tends still to be quite high at the end. This can't be said, for instance, for certain life events such as lost a loved one and looking for a job. And I think what the satisfaction survey is enabling countries to do also is to think about how they need to adapt the omni-channel approach depending on the life events that they're looking at. For instance, with regard to death of a loved one, which is a life event that 3 or 4 countries have selected for in-depth analysis. Um, this is really something where we're trying to understand and identify what types of mechanisms countries have put in place to make this specific life event more user friendly, if you will. Now, obviously, with regard to where we are with the project, we are still undertaking this in-depth analysis with regard to the life events. So we will, by the end of the year, have a document which we will be presenting on the overall results of the survey, but also on the good practices and the key enablers that we have identified for specific life events. So hopefully this will also provide more meat to the bones in a couple of months.
Sounds perfect. Jose, would you like to build upon this with some questions?
Yes,
And I'm also
please.
looking to the chat and other participants. So colleagues, if you like to come in, raise your hand. Otherwise, Jose, please.
If I may, Emily, thank you for the presentation. I think this is one of the first international surveys based on life events. At least for me, it's the only one I know, and I've been working in citizen satisfaction for like more than 15 years now. So I think this project is very innovative, and thank you for presenting here. I think it's very interesting what you mentioned that drivers are different for different life events or for different services. We also found the same in the Balkans, I will present later. But I have a question for you, Emily. Also, drivers change. Have you had the chance to analyze by groups of people? So maybe the older people are care more about courtesy or civil servants spending time with them, while people in their 40s with higher education and more stressful jobs and kids, they only care about time and online possibilities. So have you start analyzing this, or this is for the next stage?
Thanks, Jose. Always wanting to push the analysis further.
Sorry about
So,
that, Emily.
no. So this is something that we're continuing to do. What has been interesting with regard to some of the results, because as I mentioned and I presented it to you, um, we have had a particular focus on accessible services. So looking at the accessibility of public services, both in rural and urban areas. And there, what we found across the EU10 was that actually there were similarities with regards to the types of channels used. However, we have also started to look at, of course, the use of the types of channels by population groups. So yes, there you will see, and we have started to see, of course, this increased use of digital channels, for instance, and the accessibility of digital channels for the younger groups. However, one of the interesting aspects that we have also seen, and this is why we need to push the analysis further, is that we were sort of working on this hypothesis that naturally digital channels would be the primary channel for younger population groups. So we see that this is the tendency across the EU10. However, when you look at specific countries that I mentioned that have more of a tendency towards physical access to channels, this has continued to be the primary access, even if digital channels are available. So we have asked a number of questions that we're continuing to develop. We asked the users to indicate why they selected their preferred channel. So for instance, if they selected a physical channel, we did ask users to indicate whether one of the reasons they selected a physical channel was because a digital channel was not available. And actually, interestingly, what we have found is that for some countries, this physical delivery of services continues to be predominant. So it's not because that there isn't a digital option available. It's because the users continue to want to use this physical access to services. And this has been across, for certain countries, across demographic groups. So this is something we're continuing to develop. As you can imagine, there are a lot of different variables and a lot of different ways we can look at this, but it's always good to have questions because it means that I can further think about where we can go to analyze.
But this is already very interesting insight. Like even younger people, even with the digital channel available, sometimes even very well functioning digital channel, some of them still prefer to go and use
Yeah,
physical.
yeah,
That's a very, very interesting finding, and especially if it's in a big number of countries like you. And my second question for you is, you mentioned several times that now you are working with the countries, which I think
yeah.
is the most interesting part is okay, you have data, but now how you transform the data into detecting improvement areas, designing, redesigning services. Can you mention a little bit? Of course, you cannot maybe disclose everything, but can you mention a little bit what are you concretely doing? Are you
Yeah.
going deeper into focus groups, or are you mapping the processes to see how the service is actually provided? What are the steps are you
Mhm.
doing to actually help countries to redesign?
Of course. So I think maybe I'll start with regard to how we're supporting the countries on the measurement front and on the use of the satisfaction survey. So one of the key outputs of the project has been the deployment of this satisfaction survey and also the testing of our measurement framework on how to measure satisfaction with services. Since we have now done the survey, one of the key deliverables that we are developing for the countries is a guidance document on how to actually reuse the methodology for measuring satisfaction, so that countries themselves can then roll out this satisfaction survey in their countries, either administering it centrally or having specific public service owners deploying a satisfaction survey in the future. And so we're creating sort of a guidelines, which is really a very practical and a step-by-step approach for the countries to consider how they need to roll out a satisfaction survey. They don't necessarily, for instance, have to ask all the questions that we have asked in the satisfaction survey. They may want to select only a few, but this is one of the key deliverables for the project. The second is, of course, the support that we are providing to countries with country visits and with further analysis. So with regard to how we are supporting them, we have asked each country to select 2 specific life events that they would like to focus on. Each country has selected the life events depending on the priorities that they have within their national reforms at the moment, perhaps also certain priorities that they have with regard to rolling out those specific life events in their countries, or because they have selected life events that have a considerable difference with regard to satisfaction level in order to enable further comparison. So what we are doing is we are trying to further understand indeed the overall user journey for citizens when accessing the specific life event. So for instance, if a country has selected the life event having a baby, we are going into the countries to meet with stakeholders who are responsible for delivering those specific public services, in order to firstly map the public services that are falling under that specific life event. And I think that's one key point that is perhaps important to emphasize when we think of life event approaches and applying life event approaches across different countries, is that the life event having a baby in one country may have a different scope than the life event having a baby in another. So I'll give you an example. In one country, the life event having a baby is primarily the registration of birth, maternity leave, parental leave, that's it. In another country, the countries consider the life event having a baby to go up to the age of 3 years old, for instance, thinking about also registering for childcare, registering for the different benefits associated. So that's actually one of our areas of work, is to identify what is actually falling under specific life events, what are the public services falling under the life events. And then with the countries, we are working through these life events step by step, understanding how users can access the services. Are they proactively informed, for instance, of their obligations or of their benefits that they're entitled to? And we're really trying to map the user journey. By doing so, we are also using the results of the satisfaction survey to question why some of these results are the way they are. So, for instance, one of the aims of a life event approach is indeed for services to work together, for them to be seamless, for documents only to be provided once. And so there we're really trying to see with the countries what the results are and what the actual reality is on the ground, to try and understand further why citizens are satisfied the way they are with specific events. This will then lead to us having a fuller overview of the key enablers and bottlenecks for life events, both within specific countries, but also to undertake a comparison across the different countries. So that since countries have selected a few life events that are common across a number of countries, so as I mentioned, a few have selected I have a baby, a few have selected the driving license, we will be then able to identify some of the good practices in place. So this is work undertaken. We have 10 countries to cover. We're halfway there, but the project will be finished by the end of the year with a final deliverable produced as well as a final workshop.
Thanks a lot, Emily. I think this is super interesting, not measuring only for the sake of measuring, but measuring to improve user centricity, as Nick says. And I will definitely recommend all colleagues in the public administration in the Western Balkan that listen to us now or either later in the video to contact us if they're interested in this methodology, because it's, as Nick also said, a state of the art, and I think it's a unique project. So please contact Emily directly or contact us, and we can put in contact with Emily and her team, because I think this is a project that should be replicated everywhere, and of course also in the Western Balkans. So that's all from my side now. Please, Nick, back to you.
Thanks, Jose. Before moving to you and your part, Jose, just asking the audience one more time at this stage if there are any particular questions for Emily and Emily's presentation and the project and everything presented. Because if not, then I would leave you the option, Jose, that we move into the small break as we have foreseen in the agenda, or if you like that you would like to immediately continue and go with your presentation, and then they have the discussion around. So I would leave it to you, Jose, since we are nicely on time, even a couple minutes before. I would leave you the option, Jose.
If I may, I will propose to have a short break for colleagues to refresh, refill their drinks,
Good,
etc. Please, no singing
good,
and dancing, not big parties, because we
good.
have very deep session also later, similarly to the one before. So
Okay.
maybe we could say, I don't know, 5, 10 minutes.
Then I would say Jose that we take 10 minutes. So it's now 5 minutes past 11 Paris time. So then I would say that we take 10 minutes and that we continue with the event at 11:15. So 11:15 Paris time, and then we continue with your presentation and the discussion. For the time being, thanks big time, Emily. Please stay with us, and then we see each other back in 10 minutes. See you, colleagues.
See you. Thank you.
It's on time, 11:15, as we promised to resume. So with this, I would then like to introduce colleague Jose Diaz of the Sigma team. So Jose, please take us in and talk us into the findings of what we have seen from our assessments in the Western Balkan economies and the quite large scale survey and surveys that you have been in charge of over there. So please, Jose, the floor and the screen is all yours. There you go.
Let me see if it's sharing correctly. It is.
For the moment, no.
Okay, let me try to share window then, not the screen.
Now something is coming up. There we go. So if you can put it full screen, I think then we are excellent to go.
Okay. What about now?
Soon. Should be fine soon. Yes,
Okay.
there we go. Excellent. Thanks, Jose. Thanks.
Thank you.
Leave it to you now. Okay.
Okay, we're talking now after this presentation, very comprehensive about what is going on in the EU member states. Now we will present what's happening in the Western Balkans. So we got some insights from the surveys we ran last year. This presentation has 4 parts. First, I will allow myself to do a quick introduction about why listening to citizens and more importantly, how listen to citizens. Then I'm going to introduce the Sigma survey of citizens in the Western Balkans we ran last year. Then I will pass the floor to my colleague Luis Rouillet in Sigma here in the data measurement team, who has a very important question to address. Are we leaving anyone behind in the Western Balkans? Are all citizens equally satisfied, or we see people that are struggling when dealing with public services? And then I'll get it back myself to talk also about drivers of satisfaction after the excellent presentation Emily has done before. So let me start. Why researching user satisfaction? Okay, if you are listening to this seminar either now or at some point in the evening at your home or in the metro or anywhere, I think you're already convinced. I don't need to convince you too much, but I've working in this topic for more than 15 years, almost 20 years now. So I always like to start with this slide because I think it's important, because many people back in the days, but still now, only do a citizen or a user satisfaction survey to click a box in an action plan. In the performance indicator is measure citizen satisfaction. So they run 2 questions and they click and they are happy about it. But what they do with the results? Nothing. So why it is important to listen to citizens? First, to monitor quality. Can we measure quality through surveys? Yes, if we do it well. Of course, citizen satisfaction depends on many things. We'll address this later, not only on actual performance of the service, also on expectations, especially when you compare countries, when you benchmark countries, can be cultural differences. So it's very famous, the case, for example, in Japan, it's very difficult for restaurants to get a 5-star. Is also question about some societies, like the French, people tend to complain more with the similar level of quality than in similar societies. But in any case, if you ask the right questions and analyze the data the right way, you still can get very useful insights. So it's important to measure, especially to identify priorities for improvement. If you analyze the data within the country, comparing between different services and different kind of citizens, like Emily did before, you can definitely find out what is working well and not so well in the countries. And of course, measuring satisfaction also can create incentive for politicians and leaders to improve public services, especially if there is transparency and the data is public. I always put this example. I was born in an island south of Spain in the Canary Islands, and there is not a greater incentive for the mayor of the main city in my island, in Las Palmas, that something is working better in the biggest city of another island, Tenerife. If something is better in Santa Cruz, then the mayor will get questions and he will start improving things. Let it be public transport or kindergartens or something. So definitely benchmarking can create incentives for improvement. And also, as Nick mentioned before, and Emily also supported with data, citizen satisfaction is positively related to trust. If people can enjoy public services in a seamless, in a satisfactory way, it's more usual that they actually trust better the governments, which leads into political stability. And final, even despite all the others, satisfaction matters per se. What I mean by that? I mean by that even if your perception is not true as a citizen, if you think the public schools are working bad in your neighborhood, doesn't matter what the reality is, you will not put your son or your daughter into this school. So satisfaction actually drives behavior. If you think a public service is too cumbersome, if you think it's not worth it to ask for this help from the state because I will have to go to 10 windows, hand 20 forms, then you don't go and apply for the service. So satisfaction is a reality in itself. A subjective reality, of course, but a reality that influences behavior of citizens. So how to measure citizen satisfaction or user satisfaction? There are two classical ways. Easiest, what is now common across the world, not only in Europe, direct user feedback. You have seen everywhere in airports, in public offices, these little machines with the smileys. Now you also have QR codes everywhere. You can scan in your phone and you have 3-4 questions. Direct user feedback is good. It's good because it actually captures the direct experience in the moment receiving the survey. But it also has some problems. First, it tends to be more biased. Why? Because people who take the time, especially if the survey is a bit longer than just a machine, people who take the time to answer these direct feedback user surveys usually are polarized, are mostly the people who have something to complain about or the people who are really satisfied. I have analyzed in my home country, in Spain, in my work in the Observatory of Quality of Services, that the distribution of answers with all these direct feedback mechanisms was what we call, the statistician we call bimodal. So we have a lot of people in the two extremes and not enough people in the middle, which usually is not true. Usually people tend to group in the middle answers, in the moderately satisfied or moderately unsatisfied. And also another drawback of this direct user feedback is that the question has to be simpler. If you just finish an online service or you just finish a service in the office, usually you are in a hurry. You don't want to stop and answer 20 questions. You are lucky, like the service provider is lucky if you answer 2 or 3 questions. I've seen some direct feedback mechanism with 5 or 7, but this is already too long, especially because we're overwhelmed with surveys. Now we get surveys when we book a hotel online, when we rent a car, when we book the flight, our telephone company, when we call them to do something, we always get a survey, we're tired. So if you want this direct user feedback to work, questions have to be very simple and very few. And if I may you recommend, of course, general question, are you satisfied, is good. It gives you a number. You can put it in your key performance indicator dashboard. Your managers can be happy about it, but you don't know what to improve. If you want to make use of this mechanism, please ask something concrete. Did you have to wait too long? Did you understand the civil servant? It was too complex. If you only want to ask one question, don't ask on general satisfaction. If you can ask 2, of course, ask general satisfaction, but then ask about something concrete that you can transform into action. Don't just ask, are you satisfied, to get a number that may not be statistically representative. It's very difficult to interpret what to improve if you just know that people are less satisfied in this service than in other service. Second method, what Emily present, is a general social survey. This means selecting a random sample in the population and interviewing them either by in person, face to face, what we call CAPI, or either by telephone or either internet based. Advantage usually is less biased because you approach to the people, the interviewer tell the people we're doing a survey about functioning of services in the country. So if you manage the person to agree and conduct the survey, it's not clear which services are you going to ask. Maybe they agree because they want to complain about a service, a concrete one, but you ask about many others. So usually results are in the middle of the scale. People are somewhat satisfied majoritarily or somewhat dissatisfied, but you don't observe this bias you observe usually in the direct user feedback. Also, it allows you for more complex questions. You can ask about drivers of satisfaction. You can ask how many windows you need to visit. You can ask, because the questionnaire can be longer, you can tailor, and it's easier to transform into action. But of course, not everything is good. There are long surveys, very expensive to implement, especially if you go face to face. And you ask about services that maybe the person received 6 months ago or 1 year ago. So the recall of the experience is not so clear. So my advice for you, colleagues in the Western Balkans, you should use both methods because both give you different insights and both can be complementary. So when we are talking about people being satisfied, so the classic study was done in the UK early 2000s by the consultant company Mori for the government of the UK. They did focus groups with so many people to understand, and actually satisfaction means something different for some people. For some people means I achieved my aims, I came for an employment benefit and I got the money in my bank account, or I came to renew my passport because I need to travel and I got my passport. For other people means no hassle. So I did it smoothly. I didn't have to come back next day because I forgot some documents. For some people is more about how they were treated. So what I mean is satisfaction is a complex concept. It's not a unidimensional concept. So that's why you need to measure drivers of satisfaction, like Emily was showing. And now a next question, why people can be unsatisfied. Okay, there's a lot of literature about this. I'm just putting you the circle model there because it's pretty old. It was developed in the 80s for the private sector, but it's being heavily used in the public sector. If you ask me personally, I wouldn't implement the circle questionnaire now for public services because it's a very long questionnaire, it's very complex, and it was designed for the private sector with the services in the 80s, 90s in mind, and services have changed a lot, especially due to the digitalization. But the theoretical framework, I think, is good to know. Why people can get unsatisfied? People get unsatisfied because they don't get what they expected. This is what we call the experience gap. So why users don't get what they expected? So there are many gaps that explain this. The first gap, called gap 1 in the model, I call it, this is my own terminology, ivory tower gap, is because what people design the services, the managers, they think the people want something, but the people want something else. So maybe managers think people only want digital, so just digitalize. And then just Emily show us that even younger cohorts in some countries still prefer to go to the office. Like I have a friend who's a lawyer, he was starting a consultancy company, and I told him, why didn't you do online? And he said, because I didn't bother to fill myself the occupation code, the activity code, and all the statistical classification codes I need to use to create a company. I went to the business registry and they did it for me in 10 minutes. And this is a qualified, educated person. What I mean is sometimes you digitalize bureaucracy, and if the forms are complex to understand or complex to grasp, and you don't have a human being you can reach by phone or by chat, sometimes digital experience that cannot actually improve satisfaction. Sometimes it can a lot when the services are well designed and easily. But what I mean is managers have to get to know what citizens want. It's not enough like one general director, one assistant minister with two advisors decide, okay, we will improve the service this way. You need to listen to citizens first. And of course, even you get it right, what you need to improve, you need to design it well. So there is a design gap. You might have the beautiful idea of how to improve the service, but if your design is poor, then the service is going to be poor. So also here surveys play a role. You need to implement with good information about the steps to design first and then to implement. Of course, every plan can be good, but when you meet the real users with the real needs and with the real questions, even you design, for example, having a baby and you design the most typical situations, you train nurses to do it in the hospital so people don't need to go to the civil registry. But then what happens when the parents disagree on the name or on the family name? So then you need to be aware of all possible difficulties in implementation of the services. And where you get this information? Again, you get this information from asking users, from analyzing all different possibilities, all different problems. It's also very good to interview not only users, but also frontline officers, people who deal with public services, our colleagues, civil servants that are there on the battle, on the ground, serving the citizens day by day. So this already Emily present, so I will go really fast. If you want to design good questions about a service, you need to replicate the process the citizens do to navigate the service. So people first need to find information. Which service I'm entitled, how to apply, digital, physical in which office, digital in which portal, which documents I need, which information I need to provide, when is the deadline? If I'm applying for a scholarship, the deadline is past. All this information is the first key factor citizens need to know to successfully obtain a public service. Then people need to apply. It can be physical, it can be digital, but it always means sending some kind of form. It can be streamlined, simplified, very easy. It can be very cumbersome form with 25 boxes you need to fill, but applying is a process in itself. And then applying is not everything. Then you need to receive the decision. And decision can be good, but then it's still not over. For example, if you apply for a retirement pension and you got a beautiful administrative act saying, "You are welcome, you're allowed to retire," and you get the money you expected, still you cannot pay your bills with this paper or with this now online document. You need to receive the money in your bank account. So this is also important question you need to ask. What about the outcome of the administrative act? Some administrative acts per se are just the decision. For example, a license or permit or a court, but some others need to be implemented in real life, like benefits. But of course, not all decisions are positive. Sometimes public administration rejects your application. So then you have the opportunity to appeal. And then you go back to the first square. How to appeal, where to appeal, how to find information, how to find people who help me to fill the appeal. So which questions can you ask colleagues in the Western Balkans if you plan to design your own surveys? About finding information, there are many questions you could ask. You could ask about easiness, like we do in Sigma, how easy was to find the correct information of how to apply. You can ask not how easy was to find, but how easy was to understand the information, because sometimes we civil servants tend to write the information as bureaucrats with a lot of legal terms, a lot of administrative jargon, but citizens may not be aware of this jargon. Then also you can ask about, was easy to find out which documents you need to bring? If you need to bring only your ID card, or if you need to bring another document, proof of something, birth certificate, proof of residence, was easy to find out. Then also was easy to find very practical aspects, was easy to find the opening hours, was easy to find how to get to the office. This also can affect satisfaction. or the same for online. It was easy to find which portal, because sometimes it's you find the portal, but in the portal are 50 services offered, and to find the concrete license or tax or benefit you want to ask is also difficult. So all these questions are worthy to be asked. Then you have questions about the application process itself. Here I divided between physical and digital. Very practical thing, was easy to reach the public premises. How long did it take to get there? Some countries ask even questions like it was easy to park, it was easy to take public transport there. And then, of course, the great question, it was easy to fill and to understand the application form. And because we're talking about physical, the civil servants inform you well, they were clear, they treat you well. Did you have to queue for a long time? All these questions are also important because they can actually determine the result if citizens are satisfied or not. Online questions, similar, but some specificities. In online surveys, you need to ask was easy to authenticate, because we have been seeing in many countries, also in the Balkans, that this is a driver of satisfaction. If your mobile ID solution doesn't work, or your ID card with a chip doesn't work, and you spend 20 minutes to logging into the website, then of course you are not satisfied. And again, it was easy to sign electronically or not. And all the process in the middle was easy to navigate the website. Could you save the progress or not of the website to finish later if you cannot finish at the same moment? It was easy to understand the information in the website, etc. And then you receive the decision. First question, was the decision easy to understand or not? Because sometimes people receive an administrative decision and they need someone to translate to them what it really means, if they got what they wanted or not. And also, are you satisfied with time? Did the public administration took a long time to deliver the decision? And if the decision was negative, it was communicated to you how to appeal, what are your rights? And of course, as I mentioned before, the material act. Are you satisfied with the time of the material act? Did you get exactly the money you saw in the government decision? Or in the government decision said you have right to 1,500 pension per month, but this was gross, and then when in your bank account you got 1,200. Did someone explain to you these things, or is a surprise for you when you see less money than you expected? So all of these are also good questions to ask. And then, as you are using a general survey, you have one big opportunity. You don't need to ask about concrete services only. It's always good to ask about concrete services, but you can be more general. You can ask, are you satisfied with the functioning of all public services you have received in the last year? You can ask, are you satisfied with public servants treatment, with all of them, not just one? You can ask questions like the typical Gallup question about problems of society, but about services. You can ask, which are the 3 best services in your country, in your opinion? What are the 3 worst services? What are the priorities to improve? If you were actually the Ministry of Public Administration, which will you be your priority? What are the most common problems? All these questions can give you a great insight of how the service delivery works in your country, so it will help you a lot to design areas of improvement. So after all this theoretical introduction, let's see what we did in Sigma in the survey of public servants. We did a social survey approach. So we interviewed 9,000 citizens in the Western Balkans, face to face by person. So it's 1,500 per economy. Random sample, of course, stratified by municipality, so we get sure and quotas by gender and age, that we will get enough rural and urban people and enough male and female people and a balanced distribution by age. But our survey, I need to make a small disclaimer here, is not a service delivery survey. Why not? Because as Nick mentioned before, we work in all areas of public administration, public finance, public procurement, accountability, so human resource management, etc. So we have questions about ombudsman, about courts, about stability of laws, about predictability of laws, about transparency of the government. So we didn't have the space to ask all the things I mentioned you before, or all the things Emily is asking in her survey. So we had only, because surveys have to be short, You cannot have a citizen answering your questionnaire for 2 hours because then you don't get any response rate. So our survey, unfortunately, has to be limited regarding of what we could measure. And also because the objective of our survey is to inform the results of the assessment of public administration. As you know, we assess lot of administrative data. We read the laws to see, for example, if the citizen have the right to apply digital, if the citizen have the right to appeal. Again, we compare the law with the key of the EU, if the government is respecting the open data and reuse directive, etc. We check also a lot of administrative data of how services work in real life. How long does it take to renew an ID card in average? How long does it take to receive an employment benefit since the appeal, since you applied, etc. But of course, we wanted in our methodology some data based on perception, what the citizens think about this. So that's why we have a limited number of questions. So we included 6 services in our survey. We ask about renewing ID cards and passport. We ask about civil registry, like registering a birth, registering a marriage, a divorce, or sadly the loss, the death of a close relative. We ask about health, but only about the administrative process of health. We don't ask about quality of doctors. We explain very much. We're asking about if you can get how easy it is to get vaccination certificates, on prescriptions, etc., from health providers. Then we also ask about unemployment services, if people are or not satisfied with unemployment benefits, with registering as unemployment in the job seeker offices, etc. And then we asked also about pensions. And of course, we have a question about, are you satisfied with all services have you used recently with the government? So we have a more generic question that allows us to capture not only direct experience with services, but also the general perception, the general feeling of the citizens. So which question did we have? So mainly we have actually 11 questions. You see here 9, but two questions are divided. First, we ask, of course, a filter question is not there. Did you use the service recently? Because if you haven't used the service, of course, we don't ask you about the service. And then we ask the channel of contact. What did you use? Did you use physical? Did you use online? Then we ask about if it was easy or difficult to find information. Then we ask it was easy or difficult to understand the information. Then we ask, did you need to present documents that the public administration already have? Then we also ask about the time to finish the procedure. Then regarding physical services, we ask about the treatment by civil servants. We also ask about the distance to the offices. And about digital services, we ask about easy to authenticate and easy to navigate, easy to use. I'm afraid I'll need to take 30 seconds to move to a bubble because in the one I am, bubble means a room, it's already been used, so I'll need to move. I'll keep online, but you'll see me walking across the office. So I'm back here. Sorry for the interruption. So that's what we cover. Is it now working the way of passing the slides? Now I'm gonna have a technical problem because I disconnect from the workstation. So let me see if it works. Now let's stop sharing and sharing again then. Give me a second. If not, Luis, maybe can you share your screen? Or I'll try. Can you? Are you sharing or not? Okay. Yes, please. In OECD, we have common rooms, and sometimes you don't realize someone book it from someplace. Okay. Okay, let's see. I think it's coming. Perfect. So, yes, please. And then maybe hand me the mouse so I can pass. Okay, so where can you find our results? You can find our results already in the assessment we published last year. There you'll see general results. You get a little bit more insight in our data portal. So there you can log in our data portal. And actually, you don't need to log in. You can go there and search the results of the assessments, and there the survey results are not all together. They're in the different sub-indicators regarding, for example, sub-indicator about easiness to find information about service, etc. There you can find the results. And also, now we're working on short policy notes, doing a deep dive analysis, getting a real insight into what is happening in the public services in the Western Balkans. So, what do we see? General satisfaction. People in the Balkans are generally not evaluating bad. So 50% of them, more or less, in most of the Western Balkan economies, are satisfied with the general function of public services. Two of the economies get better results, but as I mentioned before, country comparisons are difficult. You are gathering there not only concrete experience. It doesn't mean that the economies with the best values have the best services. It also relates to expectations. What do you expect? In a place where in 3 years ago you need to go to 10 offices before getting a driver license, because you need to go first and fill a form for payment, then go to the bank and pay, then go to the first to a medical to get examination, then to go to the office, then to go to a different window in the same office, etc. And then suddenly they reduce the number of steps from 10 to 5, people will be very satisfied. But maybe in other countries the steps were already 2 since 10 years ago, and this is not paying off in satisfaction anymore. So, as also Emily did, I think it's important to compare within country what is happening in the same country. And there, for example, I put 2 examples of the Western Balkan, Albania and Macedonia, social security institutions. In Macedonia is 73, so it means social security, 3/4 of the people who has used social security services recently are satisfied. In Albania is only half, but the benchmark here is not between countries, but within country, the most interesting benchmark. You see that in Macedonia, for example, social security has a greater rate of satisfaction than renewing ID cards or unemployment services, which is actually the opposite case in Albania. In Albania, some other institutions are performing much better regarding to satisfaction. So there is how you can use our survey to identify within your own government which are the champions, which are the institutions that are providing services that satisfy most citizens, and then go and check why my institution, this concrete institution, are not performing as well as a similar institution. So that's all from the general perspective. Now I'm gonna leave the floor to my colleague, Louise Rouget, and she's gonna tackle a very important question, because in OECD we have a recommendation on user centricity, and one of our key pillars is inclusivity. But it's also important in the Western Balkans, in all the strategies, in all public administration reform strategies in the Balkans. I've read them all. Inclusivity is always there, accessibility is always there. So I give Luis this question: are we leaving anyone behind in the Western Balkans regarding public services? So please, Luis, the floor is yours. I'll mute myself.
Thank you. So yes, we've seen some general. You need to.
Also mute your speakers. If you're
I think we can see the presentation and we can hear you.
okay, go.
Okay. I think
So try again.
maybe it's because you are listening. Yes, so we've seen some general results from the citizen survey in Western Balkans. But since all populations are very heterogeneous and can be divided in some groups like old people, young people, people living in urban areas or in rural areas. We can also divide the population by working status and so on. It's essential to ask ourselves whether if anyone is left behind. So to answer this question, we run a regression with some control variables with some socio-demographics characteristics. So we use the age, the education level, the working status, the gender, and yeah, and the ability to cover expenses as a proxy for income, since we don't directly ask in our survey incomes like the incomes of the population, because it would lead to some underreporting. So we use this proxy for which we ask the easiness to cover expenses in 1 month. So in Albania, we can see that age the age has a significant impact on the satisfaction with public services, and that we can see a decreasing trend with older people being less satisfied than younger, and we could explain this by the fact that in Albania, so public services are a lot digitalized. So it's less easy for old people to understand how it works. And there's a regression. We have to keep in mind that it's only a measurement tool, but even if we can try to explain the result by some insights, it's important to search more about like doing more research about the real causes of like the real reasons why some groups may be less satisfied than others. So we can also see that in Albania, education has a great impact by almost 20 percentage points for the less between the less educated people and the more educated people. I can also tell you that the group circled are the ones we use as reference group. So we just look if there is a significant difference between this group and the other. So for education, we can see this difference. And for ability to cover expenses, we also see that the less wealthy you are, the less satisfied you are. So let's see what we have in the other countries. In Bosnia, we can see that ability to cover expenses has also a clear effect on satisfaction, and we can again see the decreasing trend with the greater difficulty to cover expenses. But we have two more characteristics that have an impact on satisfaction in Bosnia and Herzegovina. First, we have the working status, and surprisingly, we have the inactive population that is more satisfied than the working one. But that could be explained by the fact that inactive people have less interaction with public services, since they are not paying taxes, they are not they are not seeking for unemployment benefits, and they are not want like with pensions. And then we have the living area that we can see that people living in rural areas are more satisfied than people living in urban areas, and that's also surprising results, because we used to see that urban population is more satisfied than the rural one, but then it could be also explained by the fact that that offices in cities are more crowded than in rural ones. Then in Kosovo, we can also see this relationship with the living area, even if it's not really like it's a very moderate effect of only 4 percentage points, but we can see that rural population is more satisfied than the urban one, for I guess the same reasons. And we again have the ability to cover expenses that show that less wealthy people are less satisfied than more wealthy population. Then we have North Macedonia with again the education as Albania, and the same relationship, like the more educated you are, the more satisfied with public services you are, and the same again trend for ability to cover expenses, with a great difference between the two opposites, with almost 30 percentage points difference. In Montenegro, we also have the education having a great impact on satisfaction, and always the same relationship. Why this education is because people more educated tend to understand more how public services works, and how they have to what they have to do to when they interact with these public services. And there are also the living area that have a significant impact on satisfaction, but then we can see the opposite relationship than for Bosnia and Kosovo. That is, rural population is less satisfied than urban one, and this could be explained by the fact that when you're living in a rural area, you need more time to go to offices, to public services offices. And lastly, we have the results for Serbia. We again can see a relationship between age and satisfaction, with a decreasing satisfaction when the age increase, with I think the same mechanisms than for Albania. And then the ability to cover expenses, with again a clear trend, a clear decreasing trend, like the less wealthy you are, the less satisfied you are, with a great difference again between very easy and great difficulty. So to sum up, the characteristics that we find the most in that we find that have impact in most countries in the citizen survey is the income, like the proxy or proxy for income, which is significant in 5 out of 6 countries, so all governments but Montenegro. Then we have education and living areas, but as we've seen, it's important that education and income are both have both a significant impact, even controlling for each other. What that means that for education, when we control for income, people with a similar income, like we take people with similar income, and with level of education changing, we can find a different level of satisfaction. So living area also, but the results are opposite between economies. And then we have the less common factors that are the age, because we only find it in 2 of 6 governments, which correspond with higher level of digitalization. That's our Albania and Serbia. Then we have the gender. It's only in Bosnia that it has a small effect, but really small. Like it was 5 percentage points. So we didn't display the graph. And then the working status, also one out of the 6 governments we studied. So yeah, what we can retain is that it could be crucial for governments to research more on why some subgroups are less satisfied than others. Because we need to not leave anyone behind when it comes to satisfaction with public services.
So thank you, Luis. If I may wrap up with presentation.
We're doing regression analysis, so it means we're controlling for all variables at the same time. As Luis explained, it means the effect we see in education is not due to income. We compare people with the same income in different level of education and people with the same level of education with different income. And then what we're seeing is in some Western Balkan economies, we're leaving behind the older, the less wealthy people or people with less economic resources. And this can be Sorry, if you are not listening to me, sorry for this technical bug. Now I think you are. So if I want to wrap up again, what I mean is we're doing regression analysis, so we're controlling for all variables at the same time. It means like the effect we see in income is not due to differences in education. We compare the same people with the same secondary degree with more easiness way to pay all the monthly bills, and people who say, no, I struggle. At the end of the month, I have no money in my bank account every month. So we're controlling. So the effects are not artifacts of other hidden variables. We control for also socio-demographic variables standard in the models. And what we see is in some of the Western Balkan economies, older people, almost in all, are less satisfied. Less wealthy people is less satisfied. Less educated people tend to be less satisfied, not in all Western Balkan economies, but in some of them. So definitely there is room for research to know why is this happening, and room for improvement, because all in the Western Balkans, you all are improving public services a lot in all your governments, but you need to improve it for all, not for few, not for the wealthy, not for the educated, not for the young, but for all. So now let's go to concrete services. Let's offer you a glimpse of the analysis we are doing now. For example, let's start with very easy service, renewing ID card or renewing a passport. When we ask about concrete services, what we see? Satisfaction is higher than with all services in general of the country. This is because in most Western Balkans, this service has been redesigned recently, now works much better, but also because generally in surveys, when you ask about the concrete service, satisfaction tend to be higher than when you ask about general satisfaction. But this is not the case in one of the Western Balkan economies, it's North Macedonia. And this has a very clear explanation for North Macedonian colleagues listening to me. You had to change the name of the country, and all citizens in North Macedonia had to change their ID cards at the same time. So it was long waiting times to obtain an ID card. So of course, half of the population was not satisfied, which is a result that we hope is just temporary. And it was because when we ran the survey, exactly was this happening in the country. This is also important thing I didn't mention in the introduction. Some events, some extraordinary events can actually impact a lot the results of the survey. So when you are doing time comparison or cross-country comparisons, you have to note that you have to be aware of the context, because some events can actually change results. So please, next. So as I said before, individual and business characteristics play a role, but also, as Emily also very well explained, different aspects of the service make a role. But different aspects of the services are not equally important for different groups of the population. So the analysis become complex because you need to run regression analysis allowing for interactions between multiple terms, and your sample is always limited. You never can have the number of observations you want to perform everything. So please go next. So this is a little bit to explain you the results that you'll see just in 1 minute. Some things are what we call satisfiers. It means if they work really well, satisfaction boosts a lot, but if they don't go really well, satisfaction is still average. But some aspects are critical. It means that they are not there, satisfaction really goes down a lot, and when they are there, satisfaction increases a lot. And then we have dissatisfiers, things that people consider basic but essential. What does it mean? If they are not there, people are really dissatisfied, but if they are there, people don't show satisfaction either. So with this introduction, we can move to the results now. So first, easiness to find information. Is it important or isn't it not important to predict the last question of did you were satisfied with the process of renewing your ID card? It varies within the Western Balkans. Most important is in Montenegro. In Montenegro, people who reported it was easy to find information of where to renew the ID card and which documents to take. They are 20% more probable, so to be satisfied that people who said it was difficult. So this is quite a big effect. It's 1 every 5 citizens. So for Montenegrin colleagues, if you want to improve something in your ID card, concentrate in this. Why? Because with this, you can easily get some results. In some other countries, like in Macedonia, it's 4%, because there you see the problem was time. The problem was waiting time for receiving the ID, actually for getting even an appointment to renew the ID card. So information doesn't play such a big role. Then we have understanding the information. It's also big results. It was not statistically significant for Serbia. Even the sample was like 400 people answering about this survey, which means it needs to be further research. It can be that information is already clear, or people who find it unclear, still they went to the office and did the process fine, and they were not more or less satisfied than people that reported it was difficult to find information. But the effect is still not very big also in other countries, apart from Kosovo, where it's 19%, Montenegro 50%. Those are moderate effects. They are not very low, but they are not critical aspects to improve in the service of renewing ID card. If you could pass to the next. Now, the presenting information twice. We asked this question in our survey. When you were to renew the ID, did you have to present any document or information that the public administration already have? For example, did you have to bring a proof of residence, a birth certificate, etc.? And people could answer yes or not. This is what we call the once only principle in service delivery. Now it's in all laws in the Western Balkans recognized. It's in all laws in the EU. We're going service delivery people. We're talking a lot about this. We have seminars on once only principle. Once the impact in the Balkans, small. People don't care if they have to take documents that the public administration already have. Why not? We'll need to do focus group. We'll need to do qualitative research. We'll need to interview in-depth citizens. But my gut feeling, my intuition is that they are used to. As one colleague joked with me yesterday, they don't mind to bring a birth certificate. They already have 10 home just in case. They did 10 copies. So they're looking for other things. So I'm not saying we should abandon the once only principle. The citizen should be not the postman of the public administration. The citizen should not be obliged to go to an office to get a birth certificate to bring it to a different office. Public administration should exchange data in the background, of course. But what we see in the Balkans is good. You all are working in that, but this is not likely to increase satisfaction a lot regarding your public services. So please, next. Now we have the easiness to apply. Okay, now we see a greater effect everywhere. It's 35 points in Serbia. So if you report it was difficult to fill the form, then you are 35% less probable to be satisfied with the process of renewal your ID or passport. That's a critical impact. So colleagues, analyze your forms, try to understand why some people are finding it difficult, because if you do that, the service is likely gonna have higher overall satisfaction at all. The same is true for the Macedonian people. Go next. And now we move to the biggest, most important effect, which is not shocking because it's usually the highest driver of satisfaction, especially for middle-aged people and for educated people, is the time you needed to use to apply and receive the service. If you have to wait a lot in Albania, because the first appointment, think that everything is digital in Albania, but of course ID card you still need to go. If the first appointment is in 1 or 2 months, you are really most likely like 50% points less probable to be satisfied with the procedure. So this is a critical area of improvement for all Western Balkan governments. Improve in time, improve in the duration of the process, streamline the service, reduce the number of visits, reduce the information, but improve the time, because this is what, at least according to Sigma survey, this is what the citizens are, this is what it's impacting in the citizen satisfaction. So I did summarize this here with the Western Balkan average. What you see, the time to complete the whole administrative procedure, the whole administrative service to receive the outcome, in average in the Western Balkans, the impacts probability 35 percentage points. This is a lot. This is 1 out of 3 people. Then second is the easiness to complete the process. So easiness is the number of visits you need to do, how easy was to find where to go. Then in a third place comes the once only principle. You are not required to present information twice. And then 4th and 5, as an average in the Western Balkans, in every country you did see is different. It's about finding and understanding the previous information. Also, expectations can be playing a role there. Also, maybe people are used to receive the services and they're used to complex information and they don't expect anything better. So if you can move to next. But the question is, okay, this is true for ID, or it's true, at least this is the empirical evidence we found for ID, but is it the same for all services? Maybe yes, maybe not. We compare, for example, with civil registry, and what we see there, again, the time needed to complete the service, the time needed for registering your child or your marriage or your divorce in the civil registry is playing very, very important role. The most important than any other drivers. For example, in civil registry, understanding what to do is much more important than for the ID card. Also because it's a more complex process. Usually registering any of the life events you need to register in the civil registry is more complex. So the lesson here, we're still undertaking the analysis for all 6 services we have, but the lesson here in the preliminary regressions we have run is importance varies across drivers for different services. Important varies about drivers of different for different people, also for different economies in the Western Balkans. So analysis has to be tailor-made. You should actually deep dive into the results of our survey, of the own surveys you're running in all your governments, and try to understand why it's happening, and then use this information to redesign. Concentrate in what is important to citizens. Don't do like in the circle model, what I call the ivory tower gap. Don't go to a conference about interoperability and once only principle in Europe and say, all we need to improve is the once only principle, because then our citizens are going to be happy. No, your citizens are complaining, are demanding that administrative procedures take too long. So all work in the once only, I'm not saying no, of course, once only is very important, but listen to your citizens, listen to the information. So that will be all from my presentation. Thank you. Sorry for taking so long. I hope I have not put you to sleep, all of you. So now it's room for questions or comments. If someone is still here with us and want to make final comment, a remark, a protest, everything is welcome. Just raise your virtual hand. And of course, no need to do now. You can find my information easily in the website. You can contact us. You can ask us for more information. We're always happy to debate with colleagues and to discuss with colleagues in the Western Balkans. We're happy always to provide more information. So please, if there is anyone, there I see someone in the chat. Okay, that's super good question. Yes, in Sigma, we have analyzed a lot what you call administrative guillotine, like reducing, cutting unnecessary bureaucracy, cutting unnecessary steps, simplifying procedures. But it's very difficult to do this as a causal analysis when you do cross-country comparisons like we do cross-country surveys, because not the same service is simplified or rationalized every time at the same time. Even in very advanced countries in Europe, this is not done very often. Usually what you find is, okay, we had 72% of satisfaction before, and now we have 83 after we simplified. But to do a proper causal analysis, you'll need to run statistical techniques, you'll need to run a difference in difference or matching between, so you're taking the same procedures before and after the legal change and see actually what is happening and discounting for all other effects. This is technically, statistically doable, but complex. And my experience, I don't know, Emily, if you have seen a lot of these reports in practice. I've only seen few reports coming from the UK, coming from the Nordic countries, but I don't think it's common practice, and I have not been aware of any such report in the Balkans yet. I don't know, Emily, about the EU, that you work more with the EU member states than I do.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting question. I think it's in a way also the question of the moment, right? It's how to enhance also the effectiveness and the efficiency of services. What I can say is that as we've been going into the country to look at how the countries have actually put specific services in place and associate that with particular reforms they have put in place, also including the reduction of administrative burden, we can see some links with the results of the survey, particularly when we consider certain services that have had administrative reforms in place in comparison to others. However, as Jose has said, it is extremely complex to create that causal link and have a direct causal link between what's coming out of the data and what, as you're calling it, our guillotine measures have been applied. But it can pinpoint certain impact if you further look at what exactly is being put in place in the countries. I think also that's something that has we've been discussing this morning with regard to the importance of actually not just simply doing a satisfaction survey for the purposes of doing it, but for really using it to contribute to further impact. And I think this is something that the countries that are participating in the TSI project have in mind, is that by doing such a satisfaction survey on a regular basis, focusing on the same life events, it does enable some links to be made also with regard to the reforms that have been put in place in the countries.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you. I hope I have not much echo now. Okay. Thanks a lot, Emily, for the answer. I think we agree. Indirectly, we see an effect. We can see an effect of improving, but in practice, it's difficult to measure. And as you are asking for in your question, Rosalinda, about any really good study about the impact, how to quantify if I reduce the number of visits to the office from visiting 4 windows to 2, how much increase satisfaction. These studies are only available in very, very few countries, not in the Balkans yet that I'm aware. But indeed, a study like ours is enough to tell you that what worry citizens, what you should redesign. And thanks a lot for your question. If there is any other question, also you can ask the floor, and we can activate the microphone if you want to debate now. Okay, if not, I think we should come to an end. It's very big, very intense, very technical. We have provided you with a lot of data from advanced statistical models, but I think the message is clear. Research on user satisfaction, research well. Don't ask just a simple question, you are satisfied, but ask questions about why, which aspects. Make your surveys actionable. Do surveys to improve. So then you can identify areas of improvement and then go deeper. Interview in depth users, interview in depth civil servants that deal with users every day, and design your reforms based on the citizen needs, on what the citizens actually told you they want. Don't base your reform only in the opinion of a technical expert. Even the technical expert is the best expert in the world. So our message from OECD, we just launched the user centricity recommendation, is always listening to users. This is the only recipe for success. So that's all from my side. Emily, I don't know if you want to add something of this conclusion.
No, I mean, I think you've summarized it, Jose. And I think what I have found with these satisfaction surveys is that it just adds a little bit of meat to the bones to what perhaps countries have heard from citizens, have heard, also with face-to-face contact, but it actually provides also this quantitative data, which really helps also with regard to policy making to identify what impacts have been made and also to push further reforms forward. So I hope that's been helpful.
Yes, indeed, it has been very helpful. So colleagues, I don't want to take more of your time. Thanks a lot, and keep improving public services. You're advancing a lot in the Balkans in the last year. So keep advancing, and good luck in the process. Bye to all.
Bye.